Good morning. It's been my good fortune to have been part of a number of different aspects of UCC life over my time here, and that, I'm thankful, includes boarding. After a year of part-time work at the prep, I was fortunate to take on a full-time teaching role and also to move into Seton's house as an associate housemaster on the second floor in September of 1981. Now, although there are similarities between boarding then and now, much was different, and I thought I would share with you a glimpse of what that looked like many years ago. In 1981, there were in fact 115 boarders, most of them upper school students from grades 9 to 13. Now, there was an anomaly that particular year. We had 4 grade 8 boarders from the prep and 1 grade 9 prep student who's in a class called Upper Remove. Now, compared to our current enrollment of 88, the larger numbers were accommodated in rooms that included 3 or in some cases 4 students. There was 1 senior house advisor for each house who lived in the boarding apartments where the Evans and Baudouin families live now. And to support them, there were 2 of us, single types. We lived on the second floor, and there were 2 other associate housemasters who lived in apartments above the kitchen. There was also a matron. She lived on the main floor and was responsible for the oversight of the housekeeping services in the house. Now, in our apartments, we had a small sitting room, a washroom, and a tiny bedroom. And there was no doubt, if you lived in those apartments, that this was the center of activity. Without cell phones, as you can imagine, supervision was different, and communication home was very different also. If the boys wanted to call home, they would see the matron in the evening, fill out a log, and call home long distance. I think even then, phones were rotary. Parents of boarders could call in either through the matron or there was a payphone in the basement. Each night, a boy was conscripted during study to sit downstairs in the basement, do his homework, and should a call come in from an interested parent, he'd have to run upstairs and find that boy. Another student duty was early morning breakfast, where somebody had to go around 7:15 in the morning, knock on all doors vigorously. Too many responses I'm sure we can't repeat here, but it was to get boys to breakfast. Back then, boarders spent study time in the house. Nobody came to the library. The grade 8s and 9s occupied a study room on the 3rd floor, and that was supervised by one of the prefects. The duty housemaster would make his or her rounds of the house in the first hour of study, and then would go up to upper floor study to supervise the junior kids. On weekends, there was no formal programming. There might have been the odd ski weekend, but boarders back then were expected to entertain themselves. At a time where really there were no video games, no computers, there was a television. But most would engage in some sort of sporting activity. We had 2 artificial ice surfaces where the sport court currently resides. So how else did boarders spend their free time? It was often spent in the gym. We had 5 squash courts. Regretfully, there was no SAS. Others worked on the theater program, building sets. I'm sure they did lots of other things, but that's what they told us. There were sanctioned, and I'm sure unsanctioned, trips to the 7-Eleven store at Bathurst and St. Clair. Back then, slushies were quite popular. And I think regular calls, I know it still happens, for pizza still went on back then. Not sure how many of you ordered sushi in, but there was no such thing back in 1981. It just wasn't available. But ongoing games of chess and Risk would occupy time and space in the student common room. Boys' laundry was done by a dedicated laundress, Nessa, who worked in the basement of the main school. Now, I'm glad to hear that many of you boarders do your own laundry. In addition to all the other people that looked after you from a teacher point of view, there were 3 housekeepers, 1 for each floor in each house. And they loved the boys as much as the current housekeepers love you. And also there was a dedicated caretaker for each house. They were simpler times, different for sure, not necessarily better or easier, but certainly different. So, cheers to the evolution of boarding, a community in which there is far greater attention paid to individuals and for you to engage in far more activities. Congratulations and thanks to our advancement team and all the volunteers who have done such a fantastic job in our campaign. Thanks so much.
Stewards' announcements. House track meet qualifications. An important reminder that the qualifications for the 100 and 200 meter races, which are mandatory for this week's house track meet, are being held at lunch on the Oval today and tomorrow only. Please see Mr. Badali if you have any questions. Thanks. The bat ball photos are in. If you ordered photos at this year's battalion ball, please come to the main office at your earliest convenience to pick them up. I'd like to call up Sebastian Hubbard, please.
Good morning, boys. Today we're celebrating a major milestone in the history of both UCC boarding program and the college moreover. To tell us more, we are delighted to have the $14 million boarding campaign co-chairs, Martin Abel and Blake Hutchinson, with us this morning. Mr. Abel is an old boy of the class of '81. While as a student, he called Seton's his home. Since graduating from UCC, he's been a successful entrepreneur, farmer, and community organizer. Blake Hutchinson is an old boy from the class of '80, as well as the father of current day boy, Trevor Hutchinson, in foundation year. Mr. Hutchinson was a member of Wed's House while at the college. He is now the president and CEO of Oxford Properties Group. Both Mr. Abel and Mr. Hutchinson are, as co-chairs of the boarding campaign, have worked tirelessly over the last 7 years to fundraise for the revitalization of Seton's and Wed's. I'd like to ask them both to come forward with a special announcement. And I'd also like to say thank you for wearing your pins so proudly.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Blake Hutchinson. My colleague here is Martin Abel. When I was at Wed's, I had the privilege of being the head of house. Martin, he only got to be the head of house at Seton's, so that wasn't so special. There you go. There you go. And my recollection was we beat them at everything, and his recollection is the exact opposite, and the reality is it was somewhere between there and there. Well, you may be wondering why we're here today, and you're probably wondering why you've been asked to adorn those pins for the morning assembly. And we're here to tell a little story. And you may not know this story, but 8 years ago, at the Board of Governors, a decision was taken, and the decision was this close to being executed, and that was maybe we shouldn't have boarding anymore as part of the fabric of UCC life. Frankly, there'd been less interest in boarding. Frankly, the Wed's and Seton's facilities had started to deteriorate, and it made some sense maybe to take that component out of school life. And so when those decisions get taken, the word starts to spread. And so across campus, people started to say, does that make any sense for our school? And then it spread across Toronto, and then it spread across the country, and then the word went out internationally. And the whole community, not just boarders, but day students alike, turned around and said, that's so unlike UCC. If we have something that isn't perfect, that isn't spectacular at the school, let's not throw it out. Let's turn it around and make it so, make it spectacular. And if it is so much a part of the history of the school, then let's make it a big part of the future of the school too. And it was an interesting exercise in turning a problem into an incredible solution. And so the community came together, and by the way, so did the boys, because in a day like today, all of the day students came in and they wore black t-shirts and green t-shirts to honor Wed's and Seton's and to show brotherhood for their friends in the boarding house, to make a statement. And so it wasn't just the adults, it wasn't just the old boys, it wasn't just day boys and students, it was those of you in this room made a big contribution. So when that noise was heard, everybody came together, and everybody came together in a community, just like a family does to solve a problem, and decided to change their mind and said, let's get some money together, let's get a new program together, let's set a $14 million goal to invest in this program for the physical plant, for new programming, for some scholarships, and if we can do that as a community, we can do anything. So the goal was set for $14 million. It seemed formidable at the time, but Martin and I are here to tell you that as of this week, thanks to hundreds of generous donations, we have hit and in fact surpassed the $14 million goal, and continuously checks are coming in support of this program. Before I say any more, we have a video that I think articulates this story quite beautifully. If we could have the video, please. No more boarding at this great institution. No more opportunity for kids who don't belong to these neighborhoods. Not a chance.
If it weren't for boarding, I wouldn't be given this opportunity. So just like the other guys, I'm really thankful for it.
I knew that the boarders and the old boy boarders would be upset. I had no idea how much the boarding program meant to the day students.
We both benefit from day student, and the day student benefit from learning from the boarders. So I think that's why boarding is really important. Yeah.
It went on a journey, talking to all sorts of people, and suddenly coalesced that there was quite a sentiment that we actually wanted the boarding program to remain.
We were at a crossroads, and the beautiful thing is people rallied and said, we don't get it, doesn't make sense, and the flip side is everybody listened.
We're an educational institution, and it's important to own up when you make a mistake.
This was a solution about saying, hold on a second, if we're going to be in this game of providing boarding for a component of the school, let's be spectacular. And let's take the physical plant and upgrade it. And let's take the way the teachers and the kids interact and let's fix it.
In adopting these recommendations, we signaled our commitment to the boarding program by making the rejuvenation of boarding one of the central elements of our current strategic plan.
Those facilities do matter, and what this campaign has allowed us to do was bring them into modern times and make them efficient and actually quite great. And without the capital, 8 years ago, that was a bridge too far.
When you actually see the floors of those main corridors and that story that this is repurposed wood that had grown over a century maybe in the quadrangle between Seton's and Wed's or around the property itself, it's an unbelievable story. And the boys are proud of that story.
Because of the support of people who've made the financial assistance program work so well, we're able to attract boys who can not only do the program, but actually flourish. Half of them come from other parts of the world. So they enrich the culture, they enrich the classroom and the co-curricular experience. I think they bring a lot to what UCC is all about.
When you're on the floor and you can just walk 2 seconds and be in someone's room that, you know, you're with the guy from Dubai, and then you go to the other room, you're with the guy from Italy. So it's pretty fun, and all those guys were really welcoming and made me feel, welcome in the boarding community.
It's really accepting. Immediately you have that sense of brotherhood when you come. It's like having 87 other brothers, honestly.
They'll be fully integrated into what's going on in the sports community, in the arts community, and in community service opportunities in the city. The money that's come in to help support weekend programs has really made a difference.
And I just want to stay here and experience as much as Toronto as I can, just because it's such an awesome city and such an awesome environment and I feel that it flied by too fast in the past few years that I just haven't got the time to see everything there is. So.
When I think about the boys that we have now, the paradigm shift that's occurred in terms of staffing, the changes that have occurred in the facilities, the financial assistance that has allowed boys that never would have had the UCC experience, and the program which connects our borders to the larger community of Toronto, I'm thinking these guys are very lucky.
On behalf of the boarding houses and their families, on behalf of the school, we cannot thank you enough. All of you who have found a way, big or small, to make a contribution to this $14 million success story.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to live a unique experience with great boarders, great students from all over the world. And thanks to your donations, it made my 2 years here at UCC 2 awesome years.
Thank you for saving boarding.
On behalf of the Board of Governors, thank you to all those who supported boarding as part of the Think Ahead campaign.
You've had a profound effect, not just on the boarders themselves, but on the wider community. Boarding now, I think, is better than it's ever been. The boarders bring a great deal to the school. They're terrific kids, and it's hard to imagine UCC without those boys. So thank you.
I think, as Dr. Power said, it really is hard to imagine this school without the boarding component to it. And that's been an incredible 8-year story getting there. My story is this. I grew up in Huntsville, Ontario. And my grandfather always used to say the only thing good that ever came out of Toronto was the highway to Huntsville. That was his thinking. And I think it was a little harsh. But I can guarantee you I would not have had a chance to enjoy this spectacular school without that opportunity, without the opportunity to stay here. I remember my father drove me down. We had a late model car. And he drove me down, and there was a greeting group outside the boarding house. And as we pulled it in the driveway, I said, "Dad, I'm not really sure with all these wealthy kids, we want to pull up with our late model car. You know, they may judge us somehow." And he pulled right up front. He actually put the car in park. He turned around and he goes, "By the way, the reason I'm driving this late model car is so that you can attend this great school." And I guarantee you, if I bought a new car, it would not change my life. But I guarantee you, when you walk in to that campus, it will change yours. And he was so right. And when I think about it, some of my best friends, including this guy, even though he was at Seton's, great friend then, great friend my whole life. Some of my best friends came from this school. And because of the international component, I got a chance to go to school in England and to the US with great friends that I met here that gave me the idea and the inspiration to do that. And my whole business career has had an international tone to it, largely because it was made okay to think that way in these very halls. So I think all of us take a story of our own, and you may not know it yet, but the boarding component, whether you're a day boy or whether you're a boarder, will profoundly change your life. So I'm really proud of the college for making the investment that it has decided to make for the boarding program. I'm really proud of the college for taking a piece of our history that could have been kind of a sore point in the history of the school and turned it into one of the highlights in the history of the school. When boarding was in real jeopardy, the whole family came together in an international way. So I wanted to take a few minutes just to thank the many volunteers and the supporters of boarding. In particular, many of them have joined us this morning. And I won't ask you all to stand, but I would like to acknowledge some people who gave time, some people who gave money, some people who have made an extraordinary effort for this cause. I'd like to start with Adam Markwell, who was really there at the very beginning, particularly with Martin, and frankly got angry and helped a lot of people get angry about the prospect of boarding not being around, and he's been a real asset to the campaign ever since. J.P. Mackay, Ari Koplovic, Sue Guichon, David Haddon, Kathy Martin, Russ Higgins, Wally King, David Morgenstern, Todd Hargarten, Andrew and Christine Dunn, Jordan Elliott, Stuart Legier, Stu Lang, Ryerson Simmons, Link Kaler, and Lucas Atkins. I'd also particularly like to thank Andy Burgess and Andy Pringle for being the chair of the board and having the courage to make those changes, which is not easy. And of course, we have to thank Andrew Turner for his leadership of boarding, Don Coasso for his leadership on this issue and so many other things for the school, and Dr. Jim Power. As he said at the end, sometimes you have to have courage to change your mind. So if you could please give a big round of applause for all those people. So I will just conclude by saying the following. For those of us, I think we're all very lucky to live in this country. I think it's the greatest country in the world. And I think we're all very lucky to live in Toronto. And for those of you who've come from around the world, by being a boarder in Toronto, you're getting to appreciate it. And I think we're all very fortunate to be associated with UCC. And to whom much is given, much is expected. So this is a very good example of when you're asked to rally to make a change, you can do it. And that comes with the expectation of the privilege we have, and it comes with the opportunity like this one that's been presented to us in the UCC family. So this is a very good example of what we can do as a community. And with that, I would just like to say, 8 years ago, when this problem came up, there were boarders, there were day boys. Today, by wearing that badge, everybody's a boarder. And please join me in celebrating hitting this $14 million goal. Thank you. May boarding long continue. Good luck and all the best to everybody. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the entire community and the larger student body, I'd like to thank our special guests for coming here today, who have supported the boarding campaign. As a boarder myself, I'm very aware that it's only because of your great help that the boarding community has been able to continue. And in particular, I'd like to thank these two men right here. As volunteer leaders of the boarding campaign, they've played a large role and have made this victory so great. I'd also like to thank you both. Oh, you're already here. So I was supposed to ask you to come forward, but you're already here. So here's a small gift of our appreciation. Wait.